As you can see from your program, our forum today features the candidates running for the 6th Congressional District. The winner of this primary will face Democratic Congressman Sean Casten in the general election this fall. I want to give you I want to explain something that happened to us last week, so I want you to be very clear about the question and answer process. You've all been issued, or if you need them, raise your hand and our members will give you an index card and a pencil to write your question on a card. The reason we take the cards is that it prevents duplication, it prevents snarky questions, and our rules require that every question is one that can be asked of both candidates. So if you had a question regarding anesthesiology, Ms. Ives would not be able to address that question because it would be directed to Dr. Kinsler. So we would not use that question. I want you to all be aware that every single question card that gets submitted is read. But very often there are duplicates, because there are certain issues that are very important to each particular community. So our card sorters take those questions, they tally them, they read them. Sometimes they combine questions, or they will rewrite a question so that it better suits our purposes. So if you have asked a question and you don't hear your specific question being asked, do not feel that it has not been addressed, okay? Also, we only have an hour. Last week we had a forum, we had almost 70 questions submitted. We only had time for 12. So please be understanding with this. We try very, very hard to make our questions good questions that can be easily addressed by both candidates equally, and that it's a representation of the areas of interest from the entire audience. Okay? So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator, Lisa Slankard, who is from the Arlington Heights League of Women Voters.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Good morning. It's my pleasure to be with you this morning to moderate this candidate forum. As a resident of Arlington Heights, I'm not eligible to vote in this race, so I've been asked to serve as an impartial facilitator for this discussion as a volunteer with the League of Women Voters. Let me take a few minutes to explain the format and the rules of the forum. All of the candidates were contacted by mail, email, and phone prior to today. The candidates have agreed to abide by the ground rules provided by the League of Women Voters. They are as follows. Candidates have drawn numbers to determine speaking order. The moderator will, that's me, will rotate this order during the forum for questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for their opening statements. Next, each candidate will have 1 minute to answer questions. The moderator will repeat the question if necessary. If needed, a rebuttal may be requested. Each candidate may use a maximum of 2 rebuttals, and that's for the entire hour. Rebuttals will be timed and limited to 30 seconds each. At the end, each candidate will have a 1-minute closing statement. League members will act as timers, and they're sitting right up here. Candidates will be given a 30-second and 15-second warning, so please quickly complete your thoughts when you see the stop card. Time limits will be enforced out of respect for all candidates. Questions will be provided by the audience. Each question will be answered by all candidates, so please, audience, ask questions that pertain to all. League members have index cards available for you to write your questions on and will be picked up by the volunteers. They're the ones with white. Every question will be reviewed by our team of card sorters for clarity, appropriateness, and to avoid duplication. Please understand that while we get many more questions that can be answered in a 1-hour forum, we will do our best to select questions that cover a wide variety of topics and that represent the interests of this audience. Candidates have been asked not to interrupt one another. The candidates should speak directly to the audience. Audience, please turn off all electronic devices. This forum will be taped for League of Women Voters use in education for the public. A video of today's forum will be available early next week on the League of Women Voters of Palatine area website. The candidates have agreed to this. Please hold all applause until the end, and please do not demonstrate in any way to show support or non-support for a candidate. The candidates are welcome to stay a few minutes after the close of the forum to speak to audience members, and campaign literature will be available out in the hallway. No campaign signs may be posted. No voice, image, or other duplication of the forum may be used by a candidate's representative or campaign in any campaign advertising. The League of Women Voter claims copyright ownership of all recordings or transcripts produced from this event and reserves the right to publicize this forum. To view this forum, please see the details printed on your program. Please be respectful to all candidates, our moderator, and your fellow audience members. This morning, we will hear from 2 candidates hoping to represent District 6 in the House of Representatives. With us today on the ballot are Jeannie Ives, who has drawn number 1, and Gordon J. Kinsler, number 2. I want to thank you all for your participation. We will begin with your 2-minute opening statements. By number draw, candidate Ives will go first. You may begin.
Thank you very much, League of Women Voters. Is this microphone picking up? Anyway,
Stop the timing.
not sure if it was on, but. Okay. Thank you to the League for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before the citizens. I think it's really important that you guys know who you're voting for and what they stand for prior to making that selection. So I'm happy to answer any of the questions, and if you don't hear your question answered, you can go to our website, genieforcongress.com, where I filled out multiple questionnaires from many sources, and where you can watch all of my videos about my time as a state rep and my time now as a candidate for the 6th Congressional District. But let me tell you, here's what we know. We know that elections are important and elections have consequences. And it's been no more obvious than what you saw last year in 2018 that ushered in Democrat majorities in Illinois and a Democrat governor. And what you've seen under them is some of the most extreme laws passed in the legislature. What you've seen under them is 20 tax and fee hikes. So Illinoisans well know that elections have consequences and who you vote for matters. Well, I'm Jeannie Ives, and in 2020, you are going to decide the direction of our country for decades to come. And you're going to make a choice. Do you want more government in your life, or do you want more freedom in your life? I stand on the side of freedom. As a U.S. Army veteran, a West Point graduate with an economics degree, and a mother of 5 children, one of whom is a Navy pilot and another one about to enter West Point, I tell you that our family stands together, united on the side of freedom, on the side of opportunity for everybody, and the side of choices in your lives. Not choices made by some government bureaucracy in faraway places like Washington, D.C., but choices made in your everyday lives here. And that is going to be my end goal, is to really represent you and your interests, not to be somebody who rules over you with big government ideas and at the request of massively more taxes. So I'm going to enjoy this conversation today with you while we talk about all these core issues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And now candidate Kinsler, you have 2 minutes.
Thanks everybody, thanks Lisa, thanks Vicki, and thank the League and all of you guys for coming. It's Saturday morning, so I appreciate your support. My name is Dr. Gordon J. Kinsler. I'm a kidney transplant surgeon, and I'm a colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve. I've joined this race because I've been concerned that our country's going in a very socialist direction. It's taking our country down a dangerous path. As a physician, I've learned sensibility and compassion. As a person who joined the military, I feel a sense of duty, and I strive for resolve. I'm a firm believer in free markets, fewer regulations, lower taxes, a balanced budget, a strong military securing our borders. I'm not a career politician. I work. If elected, I'll continue to fight Illinois political corruption from the federal level. I'll work on good quality, affordable health care, and I'll work on lower generic prices and protect our communities and keep our families safe. I'm a team builder, not a divider. I believe all citizens deserve to live their lives free of discrimination. I've recently been endorsed by the Daily Herald and the Sun-Times. I have the best chance of winning in November to take the seat back from the Democrat. Although we have different skin tones after making just 1 millimeter incision, we all look the same. And that's the message we need to get, to reach out to everyone, all the constituents in our area. When legislators come together and work as a team, we can take care of any problem. Right now, we're facing the coronavirus. And basically what we need is people who don't politicize things, but actually find a solution and solve it. And that's the kind of person that I am. I'm Dr. Gordon J. Kinsler. I'm running to be your representative for Congressional District 6. Thanks.
Thank you. And now let's move on to the questions. Candidate Ives, we'll start with you, and you will have 1 minute to answer. So the first question is, what changes to our Social Security system do you support?
That's a great question, since Social Security is due to be bankrupt in anywhere from 10 to 15 years. So we need to modernize that system. Right now, it's a massive tax on individuals and employers. 12.4% comes in. After 44 years, you may get 1% return. This is nonsense. Any investment advisor would lose their job if that's all that they could guarantee you after 44 years of putting over 12% of your income into it. We have to modernize this system for our newest entrants into it. Meanwhile, we need to protect it for people who depend on that Social Security, and I'm all for that. But modernizing the system is not impossible to do. In fact, there are multiple ways that we can do this. And even in Illinois, we have a really good 401k option at the state university level that should be the model going forward for new entrants into Social Security, giving them a secure future with lots of growth on the upside.
Thank you. Candidate Kinsler?
Thank you. So first of all, Social Security is a guaranteed privilege and right that we're going to make sure that we follow through with all our people, all our seniors. Again, it's become a political football, and again, you need to have people thinking logically about how best to fix it. When Social Security first came online, the retirement age was 65 years old. Back then, many people didn't make it to 65. I have 5 patients now in my practice that are over 100 years old. So things have changed. We're keeping people healthier and living longer. So we're going to have to look at like age issues as far as how many people, how long they can work, and what age they would start getting Social Security. We have to make sure that it doesn't hurt our economy with too large of a tax on individuals. You know, with the Medicare tax now at 3%, that goes indefinite. And we have to basically look at corruption. You know, there was recently a police chief in Chicago in the Tribune that took over $500,000 of his deceased mother's payments, and we need to really work on cutting out fraud.
Thank you. All right, question number 2. This one, Candidate Kinsler begins. What do you think is the biggest challenge to contain COVID-19?
So, you know, I'm a physician, and again, most people in politics nowadays are attorneys, and I love attorneys. My brother's an attorney. But we need people that have kind of logical thought process to take care of this and many other problems we have. First thing you have to do is you have to identify the problem. So we need to have good testing, and that's up online. Second thing we need to do is contain the virus. That's with quarantine and basically using common sense issues. We just had a teacher who got off a cruise ship and went to the Chicago school system and started teaching. And guess what? They had to close down the whole school. Next thing we have to do is we have to treat. So we contain, then we treat. Then what we do is then we do the after action. That's where we figure out what the problems are, how we can do things better. Don't fight about it politically while it's going on. Solve the problem, get it taken care of. These are the type of things we need where we're not politicizing things, we're actually doing solutions. And basically, I feel very comfortable with taking care of these kind of problems.
Thank you. Candidate Ives?
So I'm a mother of 5 children, and I kind of know how to keep them healthy. First of all, you need to make sure that you're protecting them by giving them great nutrition, lots of exercise, keeping them, free from germs, making sure that they're doing everything that they can to stay healthy, in terms of washing their hands, staying away from other people who are sick. If they're sick, you keep them home. These are all just common sense things. Fortunately, the US government's response to this, the Trump administration's response to this has been terrific. You know, closing the border from people coming in from China, unless they're US citizens, was the right thing to do. Containing the virus, quarantine people, we're doing the right things, but individually, we all have our own personal responsibility to do the best we can to stay healthy, and if we're sick, to stay away from others so that they don't also get it. This is just common sense.
Can I use my first?
Sure.
This isn't really rebuttal, I agree with what you said, I just wanted to add, because I think this is one of the most critical issues that we face today. So we also need to basically have a command center from the top at the federal level, command centers at the state level, and then local communities. Basically, we've done that already in the hospital. The first and most important thing is you don't panic. Somebody's bleeding, you don't panic, you lose your head, you take care of the bleeding problem. So that's one of the things that we have to do. You know, to give you a perspective, there were 50,000 deaths last year due to auto accidents, 7,000 deaths last year from lightning strikes. And there was only so far 3,000 deaths from the coronavirus worldwide. So we have to keep things in perspective and not panic.
Thank you. All right, now we're on to question 3, candidate Ives. What legislation do you support to address climate change?
Well, right now, I don't see any legislation that I absolutely support to address climate change. What I do support is having a robust, innovative marketplace, including having our national labs investigate and look at how they can actually ramp up reasonable solutions like battery storage. Because if you're talking about going into something like the Green New Deal, or you want to get rid of fossil fuels, it's 100% impossible to do that without having a robust battery storage. But in terms of climate change, look, the climate changes. We know this. 20,000 years ago, you know that it was hotter. 4,000 years ago, 2,000, 1,000 years ago. At one point, 85% of Illinois was covered in with glacial frozen water. So here's the deal. Like, that was long before SUVs and industrial period came along, that we actually now are have the richest farmland because of all that glacier melt. So, I mean, we're just gonna have to figure this out together, but getting rid of fossil fuels is not the solution. I'm all for the innovative solutions in the marketplace.
Thank you. Candidate Kinsler?
So global warming is a huge issue through all groups, through all age groups, and it's something that we have to deal with and we have to kind of work at. As we talk about the globe's always changing. The globes and our other solar systems, and Venus and Mars and Jupiter and Pluto, they're having glacial or they're having polar melts too. So not everything is man-made. Having said that, though, we need to basically be good stewards of our land, our water, and our air, because we have to save it for our kids and our grandkids. I'm not your typical, stereotypical conservative Republican when it comes to the environment. I spent 5 years in the Glen Environment Commission where I wrote asbestos handling, we did tree ordinances, we did prairie path cleanups, we did recycle events. As a president of a park district in Glen Ellen, we also restored wetlands. We used solar panels to make some of our facilities completely energy cost free. So basically, we have to look at renewables as best we can. We have a lot of fossil fuel, but eventually everything runs out. So we have to always be looking to the future.
Thank you. All right, question number 4, candidate Kinsler. What legislative options are available to reduce gerrymandering?
So right now, that's basically at a state level, and that's one of the separations that our Constitution has. Certain things are done by the state. Now, in certain states like Illinois, the Democrats have the upper hand in gerrymandering. So you see, for instance, Congressional District 6, it's like a big C that starts up around where we're at and comes all the way around. Sometimes you keep it further away from your phone and your listening device. So it's a big C, it goes all the way down to Darien. When I came up here, there was a guy, my neighbor across the street that I've known for about 30 years, and I was kind of saying hi to him. And he's like, where are you going? I said, I'm going up by Barrington. So he can't vote for me, even though I'm one of his neighbors. And I sometimes can drive an hour, 15 minutes up to Lake Zurich to a football game. So basically what we need to do is a fair maps. I'm in favor of fair maps, which is making everything a nice square with basically county or city borders, so that it's much less confusing, and I think it's just a fair way to do things.
Thank you. Candidate Ives, I apologize, I did not see your rebuttal slip.
Okay.
Well,
I'll clean it up later or something.
what legislative options are available to reduce gerrymandering?
Well, you can vote in different legislators. That's how you can do it. And then they can put a fair maps referendum on the ballot and make sure that it happens. Or they can actually vote for fair maps themselves. You change out the politicians, you get different policies. Mike Madigan has controlled the maps for decades, and everybody knows it. And he carves up the districts so that he can pick his voters. So if you want change, just vote in somebody different. I have a record of standing up against gerrymandering, even against my own party. So Wisconsin Republicans, or Wisconsin Democrats challenged the Republicans on their gerrymandered map in Wisconsin. It went to the Supreme Court, and I am one of like 15 Republicans from Illinois that signed on to an amicus brief in support of the Democrats in Wisconsin against the gerrymandered maps. I am all about fair maps, but this is easy solution. You put in new politicians, you're gonna get different maps.
Did you want to do your rebuttal from the earlier question, or should we just move on?
Oh, yeah, we can
Okay.
move on for now.
All right, so question number 5. This one is for candidate Ives. Red flag laws have been proposed to reduce suicide and domestic violence, death or injury. Please explain your position on these life-saving bills.
First of all, red flag laws, for the most part, are unconstitutional in that they take away a right that is given by the Constitution. And we don't need red flag laws to keep Americans safe from gun violence. What we need is more mental health, and we need people paying attention. Whether it's happening in your family, at the school level, when you see kids in trouble, when you see adults in trouble, then you have the individual personal responsibility to take those guns away. And there's ways already, if there is somebody with mental health conditions, to actually go to the right officials and get them, involuntary committed. But we already have a process to deal with that. If there is a constitutional way to put in a red flag law, we can look at that. I have not seen that yet. Every single thing, especially in the state of Illinois, is taking away your rights without any due process, and I am not on board for that. Again, this is something we personally need to watch out for. We need better mental health. We need, if you see something, say something, working in all of our institutions, whether it's work or school.
Thank you. Candidate Kinsler.
So I'm a strong proponent of the Second Amendment. I believe the Second Amendment protects all the other amendments. I believe, I don't hunt anymore. As a child growing up in Joliet, on the farm we hunted. I don't hunt anymore, but I believe in the Second Amendment to protect ourselves from government tyranny. Having said that, we need to be reasonable about gun control. I believe that somebody who's mentally ill, or somebody who's a domestic abuser, or somebody who's a felon should not have the right to have a gun, at least at that period of time. I do believe that if family members who know their family's best, we all have relatives or friends or neighbors that can go through some tough times with mental illness. I agree with Jean that we need to put more emphasis and more resources towards that. But there are times when those individuals should not have access to a gun. And it's oftentimes the family members that know best on what the situation is. Now, it's very difficult because you have to balance the bureaucracy against, the Constitution and the family's needs, but I think you have to be reasonable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, question number 6. This one is for candidate Kinsler. What do you think most distinguishes yourself from your opponent on the issues?
Actually, there's not a whole lot that distinguishes us on the issues. I believe we're both Second Amendment, pro-life, low taxes, balanced budgets, strong support of our military, strong support of our police force. The difference is just in messaging. I've had a career basically trying to bring people together. When I was the Park District President in Glen Ellen, I was the only Republican on a board of 6 Democrats. And we didn't obviously agree on most political issues, but we were able to find common ground in getting rid of corruption in our Park District, actually lowering taxes and making things more efficient. And during a 2-year period, we actually lowered the property taxes by 33% for the Park District portion of local government. It's almost unheard of in this area in the western suburbs. So you have to basically find common ground and basically try to find solutions to the problems. rather than just give speeches and, you know, kind of stomp the ground. That's how you get people to listen to you to start a dialogue.
Thank you. Candidate Ives?
Well, we really don't know how we differ on the issues because I have a voting record on voting for a lot of different legislations, and quite frankly, my opponent doesn't, so we don't really know. I have supported a number of candidates, only to have them go down to Springfield and really kind of disappoint me, as they fell in with leadership votes, as they fell in with, you know, bailing out Exelon, a $2.4 billion company, when it made no sense for them to take that vote. And these are people that I supported with my money, my time, my work. In fact, I supported Jay Kinsler in 2018 when he attempted to win a state rep district in his backyard, and I gave him all the policy advice that I could possibly give him. He didn't end up winning that race, but I don't know because I've been so disappointed by so many people who say one thing on the campaign trail, and then they get there and they vote completely different. I've been a solid conservative, you can check my voting record. And what is really lacking sometimes is whether or not you have the political courage to actually take on the conversations when you're in the heat of battle, when you're in that committee house, when you're on the House floor. That is the difference here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
So the most important thing, if you're a Republican in this audience, about this race is winning in November. That's what it all comes down to. We have to get a candidate that can win in November. Now, we're both going to be able to get the 35% of the right conservative Republicans. The problem is this district has changed. This district isn't the same as it used to be. You have to be able to reach out. You know, I've reached out to all the different communities. In the last couple of weeks, I've been to a mosque, I've been to a Hindu temple, I've been to the Chinese American Center, I've been to Korean events, Korean American events. These are the people that are going to help us win this seat.
Thank you.
And if we don't have them, we're going to have problems. Sean Cass is going to get his re-election.
Thank you. Candidate Ives, do you have a challenge?
Yes, I'm so blessed in this election to be supported by every single Republican organization in the 6th Congressional District that is endorsing this race. Every single one of them has come onto my side, onto my campaign, because they know that I can win in November. And I have really prominent folks from around the nation helping me out in this effort. Really solid conservatives who are constitutionalists, who believe in the rule of law, who are just come forward to our campaign. We have over nearly 500 volunteers. We have over 4,000 individual donors who have come to donate to this campaign. We're very thrilled. We have united the party behind our effort, and I'm so thankful.
Thank you. All right, now we're to question number 7. This one is Candidate Ives to start. Do you support or oppose transgender service in the military?
Yes, I oppose that. I oppose that on a number of fronts, and that's my stance.
Thank you. Candidate Kinsler.
I'm a supporter of don't ask, don't tell. You know, in my profession, I take care of a lot of people that don't have the same kind of beliefs as I do, whether it's sexual orientation, etc. I've also worked in the military now over 13 years, and I'm still active in the Army Reserve. And I've met some people who probably have different sexual orientations that I do, but they've saved a lot of lives, and I've witnessed that. I don't judge someone by their race, their creed, their skin color, or their sexual orientation. And I think we have to kind of move on from that. I don't believe in people cramming an agenda down other people's throats, but at the same time, you know, we're all in this together, and basically we need to all work together and not let any kind of discriminatory barriers set us apart.
Thank you. And Candidate Ives will use her second challenge.
Well, fortunately, the military did away with Don't Ask, Don't Tell 27 years ago, under Bill Clinton in 1993. So you can openly serve however you identify. However, if you are transgender, it can be nearly $1 million in medical needs to just transition. It creates a lot of medical issues. If you use an inhaler past the age of 14, it disqualifies you from military service. This is about the medical necessities of folks that want to transition, and look, they can do that. They're free. It's a free country in America. You can do what you want after the age of 18. But the military is not one for universally allowing for that medically.
Thank you. All right, question number 8, candidate Kinsler. Do you support term limits for all levels of government?
Yes, I support term limits, including my own. I think that's the best way to go. That's what our founding fathers had envisioned in the old days. You had a farm, you had to support your family. You didn't get it. And if you were gone from the farm too long, your family starved. So that's the way it should be. There's so many politicians now, they get huge PAC money, they get huge donors, they get huge lobbyists that support them. And I think it's just bastardized the representation of a legislative representing their people. Thanks.
Candidate Ives?
Yes, I support term limits, and I signed pledges to do so, and I essentially term limited myself when I ran against Bruce Rauner and basically could not run then for the state rep seat that I had. So, fully supported it, and Illinois would be on a lot different trajectory if we had gotten rid of Mike Madigan decades ago.
Okay. Question number 9, candidate Ives. The Kaiser Family Foundation reports that high-risk pools have insurance premiums nearly double market rates, high deductibles, and lifetime or annual caps. Do you support the Republican Study Committee proposal for high-risk pools for those with pre-existing conditions?
Yes, I support that, plus I support guaranteed issue. High-risk pools actually were very beneficial prior to Obamacare. And we protected folks with pre-existing conditions 23 years prior to Obamacare. It was part of the HIPAA change that occurred in the industry. And actually, Obamacare doesn't exist now in its current form. It's been decimated because by Democrats too. I mean, they didn't want taxes on highly compensated healthcare plans for the public sector unions. They didn't want the medical device tax. They got rid of the individual mandate as well. So it's completely different. But these pools are actually being requested by states. Nearly 30 states have offered acts for 1332 waivers, so they can create their own sort of high-risk pools that take care of people in the way that they want to. They are a good tool to bring down the cost, and in fact, they were less expensive, high-risk pools, prior to Obamacare. Obamacare upended the insurance market, and we need to get back to open competition in this area.
Thank you. Candidate Kinsler.
Healthcare is probably the single biggest issue among Americans right now. It's important to basically everybody wants to live long, everybody wants to be healthy. The problem is politicians getting involved, it usually turns into a disaster. Obamacare has been a great example of that. So before Obamacare, pretty much a lot of people didn't have insurance. In other words, they didn't have a piece of paper that said they had insurance, but they all got health care. All they had to do was come to the local emergency room or come into the doctor. Guess who took care of myself and our colleagues? Half the stuff we do, we don't get paid for, but we basically take care of everybody. Well, then along came the politicians saying, we're gonna give insurance for everybody. So everybody got a piece of paper. Some of you might have even had Lincoln Insurance, which was an Illinois insurance, that basically completely went bankrupt. There used to be hundreds of insurance companies with a lot of competition, and there was excellent care and fair reimbursement to support the system. Now there's about 5 insurance companies nationwide. Basically, the more government has control over your health and your health insurance and over your doctors, the worse the outcome's gonna be. You need somebody who kind of knows how to fix things from the inside.
Thank you.
Rather than outside. Thank you.
All right. Question number 10, candidate Kinsler. How will your fundraising efforts compete against Sean Casten's fundraising?
I'm kind of a grassroots guy. I put my money where my mouth is. I put a lot of my own money. I have people write me a check. I can tell that some elderly person writing a check for $25, I can hardly read the writing. Every dollar that we get into our campaign, I spend on a sign for a piece of literature, something related to the campaign. I don't have these big PACs. I don't have these big lobbyist groups to do it because I'm not the kind of guy that they can buy. I'm the kind of guy that does what's best for my constituents. Money doesn't drive me. Basically, I want to get my message out and I want to take care of the people in this room and the rest of our constituents. The money will come after this primary because this is a pivotal race. Congressional District 6 is one of the most important races across the country. So I'm not worried about getting widespread support after we win this primary. But what I can tell you is I'm going to spend the dollars wisely and spend it towards the campaign and not anything to do with my own personal needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Ives?
Look, Money allows you to, get out your message. That's why money's important in politics. Unfortunately, there's sometimes too much money, as we've seen on the Democrat side. But, Bloomberg proved though, you can spend $500 million and you're not gonna win. And we also proved that in the race against Bruce Rauner. This is a guy who had $100 million with a name ID, could write himself an unlimited amount of check. We had a very small amount of money, and we were still able to come very, very close to defeating an incumbent governor, which would have been historic. So we understand that you need enough money, you don't need to have the most amount of money. And we're very, very, very blessed to have nearly 4,000 donors from across the United States who have written checks and helped support this effort. 89% of our donors are small dollar donors. That is not true with Sean Casten's campaign. He is supported by large PACs, especially on the financial services community he serves on, because they're trying to buy his favor. And that is not Jeannie Ives. I have stood up to lobbyists and people who have contributed to me on the House floor. I have voted against my own interests because it wasn't right for the taxpayers.
Thank you. All right, question number 11. This one is for candidate Ives. Many Illinois residents have experienced increased federal income taxes as a result of the recent tax changes that limit interest and property tax deductions. Would you support legislation to raise or remove limitations?
I've answered this question quite a few times, and yes, I support a narrow increase on the SALT cap from $10,000 to, let's say, $15,000. That's fine, because guess what? I understand we're a donor state. I understand I'm here to serve my district, and then property taxes. We're number 2 in the state, and across all the states for the highest property taxes, and I'm gonna do what I can to protect my taxpayers. I'm all on board for that. It's at what cost? At what cost? You're not gonna get just a narrow change. If you do, great. But more than likely, they're gonna say, well, you're gonna have to increase the corporate rate. Well, we want to have another special tax credit here. So it's at what cost that comes. But believe me, the reason you have high property taxes has nothing to do with the federal government. It has everything to do with Springfield. And that's where we need to put our emphasis on. But yeah, would I protect my taxpayers? Absolutely. The hypocrisy here is that the Democrats want you to have a graduated income tax the wealthy more, and at the same time, give them a tax break on property taxes, which is entirely fault of the entire Democrat establishment. That is the hypocrisy in both Sean Casten and Lauren Underwood's proposal to increase the SALT.
Thank you.
So the SALT tax is basically a penalty for people who lived in blue states. Unfortunately, many of the people in this room were collateral damage to that. Our previous congressman before Sean Casten helped write that legislation and somehow forgot about his constituents. I would be in favor of raising that limit on the SALT tax, basically to represent my constituents. Now, the core of the matter, though, is property taxes. And I've worked in local government, and I've actually, rather than talked about lowering taxes, actually lowered property taxes. And I basically knew how to do it, and I did it working with a bunch of Democrats. So it can be done, but you need to have some political will. You also need to have skills as being able to win people over to your side of the argument and showing the logic. There's a whole lot of good arguments out there, especially when you see people in Illinois, the producers, leaving, and they're basically taking their jobs, their businesses, and their investment in the state with them. We need to kind of reverse that at the local level here in Illinois. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I still have a number of cards, so we'll stop collecting them at this point. We're not gonna make it through this whole list, this whole pile. Okay, so we're on to question 12. And this one is for candidate Kinsler. How will you work across the aisle to benefit the district and country?
So again, that's been our theme. That's what the newspapers have seen in me. I work at a hospital. Most of the time I've been the president of medical staff at Elmhurst Hospital with over 600 doctors. I've been the chief of surgery. And they say getting doctors to work together is sometimes like herding cats. And that's true. Everybody's got different opinions and different things. But basically, what you need to do is you need to look for common ground and basically do that. Now, again, in the Park District, we had 6 Democrats. I was the lone Republican. I got the highest vote total in the general vote, but Glen Ellen, the Park District Board President, is elected by the board itself. So I thought, there's no way Kinsler's ever going to be president of the Glen Ellen Park District. But again, after a couple of years, guess who they elected to be the president of the Park District Board? It was me. So I've never compromised on my principles. That's just not the way I am. That's not how you deal with patients. It's not how you deal in a practice. It's not how you deal in business. But what you have to do is you have to be able to win people over to the right way.
Candidate ask.
This is a great question. I served in the super minority when I first showed up in Springfield in 2013, and it was Governor Quinn. And then I served in the minority still when I was under Governor Rauner for 4 years. And in order to pass legislation, I had to have bipartisan support to pass anything out of the House. And I did so. And the best legislation I passed came from the constituents that I served. First, the College of DuPage reform. Maybe not a big problem for you, but back in DuPage, when Dr. Bruder was spending taxpayer money recklessly, we had to take that on for reform. And I did that, and I passed the bipartisan legislation that became the model for further legislation down the road. Then I helped pass what we call the network adequacy bill that ensures there's an adequate care, health care around the state, and I did that in a bipartisan way. And finally, I helped protect condo owners that were getting scammed by Section 15. And in fact, the Democrat who included my legislative changes did so without even really reviewing it, said, Jeannie, I accept your changes wholeheartedly. That passed unanimously.
Thank you.
So I've worked bipartisan before.
Thank you. Question number 13, this one is for candidate Ives. To what extent do you support the transfer of military funds to assist construction of the border wall?
To the full extent that it's possible to do so legally. And the courts have ruled that, President Trump has the ability to move funds around to secure our nation. And he seems to think that we need to use those funds to secure our border at this point. So that's how I read it. And the commander-in-chief has full access to making sure the nation is secure. In fact, it's his #1 priority to ensure the security of our nation. And if that's how he wants to do it, then people can judge him for that decision and many others when it comes to November 2020.
Thank you.
So it's very important that we secure our southern border. It's the whole difference of what makes us a country and a nation compared to places that don't have borders. As a physician, we've seen things that happen when you don't secure borders, when you don't vet people coming in. One of the things we've seen for years, tuberculosis in this country has been on the decline. In the last few years, we're seeing now an increase in tuberculosis. And this isn't your grandmother's tuberculosis. This is a very virulent type of tuberculosis that's multi-drug resistant. Last summer, I was in our hospital and I was talking with our infectious disease guy who was in on a Saturday. So what are you doing in here? And he says, you're not going to believe it, Jay. But he goes, we have a case of malaria in Elmhurst Hospital. This came from somebody who was an illegal immigrant that got in and then came into our emergency room and we took care of. So it's very important not only for the security of our nation, but also for the health of our nation, that we have a border and that we keep it secure. So I'm for any type of work that we can benefit them.
Okay. Question number 14, this is for candidate Kinsler. Regarding the fossil fuel industry, do you support continued subsidizing of the industry? Why or why not?
Well, I don't believe that any industry should be subsidized other than for safety net factors. For instance, like the healthcare, we need to have a safety net for the people who are disabled or children or people who can't take care of themselves. As far as corporate subsidies, I'm a free market person. I fall down on the side of free markets. So I think that there should be no subsidies. I'm not against fossil fuel. I drive a car, and it's still, at this point, the best way of energy, but we have to make it clean, efficient, and we have to continue to look for other ways to kind of expand cleaner, renewable energy sources.
Okay. I believe this will.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, sorry. Yes. Please do it.
Look, the highest subsidies when it comes to the energy sector fall to the renewables. And those subsidies are really for solar and wind, and everybody knows it. So the production tax credit, which is for wind production, has been in place since 1992. And still they are subsidized heavily, like multiple times what you find in the fossil fuel industry. And that's just the plain truth. Now, at this point, after having massive subsidies for wind and solar, at some point they should fall down to the normal level. And the subsidies that are happening in fossil fuel are nothing more than you typically find in those industries. They get research and development tax credits. They get job employment tax credits, things like that. Those are normalized subsidies, fine, that's a tax credit issue. But the idea that we are going to massively subsidize energy that needs backup from fossil fuels and is not that, great at doing anything yet is wrong. We need to let the free market work in this instance, and we'll find the best solutions. We're super innovative in the state and in this country, and we're going to find solutions for our energy needs far into the future that also protect the environment.
Thank you. All right, question number 15. This one is for candidate Ives. What measures would you support to assist those overburdened by student and parent loan debt?
This is a great question. I was just with a group of people at a little meet and greet last night, and this question came up. And a guy who is from the south suburbs who paid his way through college said, and he's a millennial, he's like, there's no way we are going to just pay off people's student debts. There's no way. I paid everything. I see my friends going around the world and doing these trips and not paying for their student debt. There's no way. They need to pay this off. The way that we can solve this is get the government, the federal government, out of making these student loan guarantees and make universities more responsible for the education that they seek out, and better counseling for them when they take on loan debt. That's what has to happen. Mitch Daniels, read his article in The Atlantic, how he's helping students. He has frozen tuition now for 9 years in a row, under the rate of $10,000. He's doing great stuff, and it's not by bringing in massively more international students either. It's by watching the bottom line, and they've got great programs there to help people through college, and that's where we need to focus.
Thank you.
So what happened to the price of college? So when I went to Loyola University undergrad, it was $3,100. I was able to pay for that by working a summer job. My brothers and I had a roofing company that we were able to do. When I went to medical school, tuition was $11,000, and I was able to pay most of that kind of as I went, again, working just in the summer. Now, undergrads, $50,000 plus medical schools over $100,000. The reason that this has happened is because it's when college costs and higher education costs have went up way faster than inflation. Why did that? Because our government's made all these loans available. So as the government made the loans available, the students take the loans and the colleges say, oh, they can afford it now, so now we're going to jack up the price. What happens is you get a lot of college students that get educated in things that aren't really useful in life to finally get a job to pay them off. So I think the government has to quit subsidizing all these loans. And if they are going to do it, they need to have better control on the product that they're paying for, which is the college. What kind of quality are we getting out of our college dollars that our students then have a difficult time paying back after? And that's what I would look at legislation to correct.
Thank you. All right. I think we'll do one more question. This one is for candidate Kinsler. What are your thoughts on campaign finance reform?
Well, I think there should be, I believe in the First Amendment, and that's what kind of campaign finance reform is, that, people should be able to express themselves going into the candidate, et cetera. Except you've seen huge, gross examples of, how we just have billionaires running against each other. And I think it's insane, and when I look at people's FEC reports, even locally here, what they spend money on, it just doesn't jive with being fiscally responsible, being efficient, and trying to spend your donors' money or your constituents' money. It's all that same philosophy. And I do think there needs to be some type of controls, because otherwise there's no chance, like, we heard earlier today about, well, this group, this backs me, all this group backs me. Well, yeah, they back you because you give them a lot of money, and then therefore they back you. And so for people like me that want to come in and be citizen legislators, people that actually have a job, I work every day, I work in the community, it's very difficult to basically fund a campaign. So I think it would be nice to see a little more even ground with some campaign finance.
Thank you.
Well, maybe the campaign finance reform that needs to happen is with self-funders. My opponent's given this campaign $100,000. I have not done that. Bloomberg has basically tried to buy an election. You've seen a lot of that happening. So, look, there's a lot of transparency, there's even more transparency at the federal level about the money that's raised, who's donating to you. They have to give all their employment, background, their address, their donations, anything over $200 is tracked. I think there's plenty in that. It's whether or not people should be able to come in and literally buy elections with having their own money in the game, because they're super wealthy and can afford to do it. I think maybe there's something that maybe should happen in that realm. Otherwise, we have a lot of campaign disclosure requirements already. And, look, campaigns should be able to spend their money the way they want to spend it. On the backside, having the government decide what you can spend your campaign money on is just a ridiculous idea. It's how the money is raised, but there's plenty of scrutiny there.
Thank you very much. That completes the candidate questions. I had quite a few we didn't get to. Thank you all for the very excellent questions that you sent in, and I'm sorry if I didn't get to yours. Now we're going to move on to the closing statements. The candidates will each have 1 minute for their closing statement, and candidate Kinsler will go first.
So, Lisa, thank you. Vicki, thanks for putting this on. Thank you guys for all coming on a Saturday morning. I appreciate your great questions. I had the good fortune of knowing Henry Hyden was a good friend of mine. He was a legislator for many years here, and I asked him a long time ago, what would be the best piece of advice you could give me if I ever decided to try to run for Congress someday? He says, Jay, the best thing is listen, don't talk. And, I've honed that as a physician. People come to me, they explain what ails them, and then we come up with a treatment plan and a solution. And I'd like to bring those talents to the residents of Congressional District 6. I'm a unifier, not a divider. I try to find common ground. And I like to be able to get the job done, get things done for our constituents. I'm a citizen volunteer. I'm not a career politician. And I believe I have the best chance to take this seat back in November. Again, my name's Dr. Gordon J. Kinsler. I'm running for Congressional District 6, and I thank you for your support.
Thank you. Candidate Eyes.
Again, thank you all for being here today and for listening politely as all these questions were asked and answered. And if you need more information, you can go to our campaign website, genieforcongress.com. I'm extremely transparent about how I feel about things, and that way I can represent you best. So I tell you again, the best solutions that when I was a state representative came from the people that I served. We had an open policy to talk to anybody, didn't matter what political background, never checked that at all, in fact. And a lot of my solutions came from those folks that I serve. I want to represent you in Congress. It's you that matters. And look, control of Congress is going to be very important in the next election cycle. It's going to determine the direction of our country for decades to come. And we need to solve these problems because we can solve these problems. The 6th district is an enterprising, generous district. We have great ideas that should be leveled up to the national level. And I look to be your advocate for your ideas about how to solve some of our deepest problems in this state, in this country. Thank you so much.
Thank you. As we bring this forum to a close, I want to thank the candidates for their participation. And the audience, the candidates will be available after the forum if you have further questions. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, thank you all for coming. And don't forget, early voting began on March 2nd. The primary election takes place on March 17th. Please participate in our democracy by casting your ballot. Go vote. Thank you.